geared towards.
So there's actually some acquisition that eventually around the PlugFest Plus that delivers capability to the Air Force.
Exactly, that's the intent, and by eventually we're talking in a matter of a few weeks is what we're looking at. So we have an event, we observe what industry can provide, and in fact, industry, this is all a collaborative process, so when you announce what you need, you still work with industry even before the event. They're able to go and perform tests and validate their own products, so when they show up to the event, it's relatively well known how each vendor will perform, but at least they get to show their product, and there might be matching, there might be circumstances where one vendor can provide excellent capability in one factor and another in a different parameter, and maybe you form partnerships. So it's very nimble, it's very accessible way for companies to come in and really get great value back to the Air Force and of course to the warfighter, and frankly it's better for the taxpayer, it's better for the vendors too to have this type of process.
Sounds like it. So you mentioned this other transaction authority is outside of the FAR. How would you compare and contrast it to a traditional contracting process?
Well, there's very little within other transactions that you need to comply that relates to the FAR. In fact, there are lists of laws that specifically don't apply. So other transaction authorities, again, they were derived in the early 90s. They were actually created by NASA when NASA was chartered in the late 50s. But they were brought to DoD through DARPA in the early 90s, and now all of the services have the authority to use them. But effectively, think of your most onerous FAR clauses, and they don't exist within another transaction. Now, with that said, of course, a contracting officer who executes another transaction has to be very, very careful. Just because you don't have to use FAR clauses doesn't mean that you won't. That you can determine on a case-by-case basis which elements of the FAR are most applicable. But the point is that the contracting officer has the choice. They have the ability to really refine an acquisition process and a contract to what is needed for that specific effort. So it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility to do, frankly, what makes sense.
So it doesn't remove from the contracting officer the responsibility of spending the government's money wisely.
Oh, of course not. Yeah, of course
but
not.
It does give them some flexibility, and in the contracting community, I would imagine that not having to respond to RFPs with big proposals and go through that whole source selection process, to be more innovative, flexible, agile, quick, would have a great deal of appeal.
Yeah, and again, if a contracting officer wanted to use an OT and there was a need for some of those standard processes, they could still do it under another transaction. The point is that they're just not bound to. They're bound to do only what makes sense for the government. And there are some other factors within other transactions, because they're focused on non-traditional defense contractors. There are requirements that if you are a traditional defense contractor, that you include non-traditional companies as part of the process, or you provide a cost share. So there's a set of rules around who can participate. But those rules are flexible, and again, they're designed to really just focus on what makes sense. And so that I would see as the key difference. I will also say, for my FAR-based friends, that the FAR also offers a lot of flexibility, and so we certainly are focused on activities that work within the FAR to be more innovative. This particular effort, though, is most appropriate for an OT because of the nature of the collaborations that might occur and our desire to really, really focus on getting a lot of different companies engaged.